Good morning, everybody, and good afternoon to our fellows on the East Coast. My name is Brett Goldman. I'm one of the guys over here at Customer Success. I also work a lot with partners and integrations here at Axosoft. And I'm also joined with Michael Robinson, who's done a lot of these in the past. If you've seen them, we'll kind of just take you through all the different things we can do with our APIs. So a couple of quick housekeeping things before we go ahead and get started. Hopefully everyone can hear me well, and if you want a few seconds just to adjust the audio. If anyone does have any audio issues, there is a little chat option in the GoToWebinar screen, so just go ahead and let us know, and we'll try to address those as needed. Hopefully we won't have anything, but it's sometimes difficult for us to know if you guys are having issues. So if you want to go ahead and let us know, we can hopefully address those as soon as possible, and then we don't skip any beats. A couple other quick things. There are options just to go ahead and ask questions in the GoToWebinar interface. I can go ahead and answer those to you directly, so just feel free to ask away just over chat. If there is any time that it makes sense to stop and have questions during the presentation, we'll go ahead and address those there as well. But we are definitely going to save a good amount of time at the end just for Q&A, any questions that you guys would have regarding the API. So this is definitely just like an API webinar. So if we'll try to keep all the questions mostly just in gears just toward the functionality of our programmable interface. If you have any questions about the Axosoft product or usage, definitely we always love to hear those as well. But we're just trying to keep everything just on topic here. So if you do have any questions about the application or product, definitely just go ahead and send those to us at success@axosoft.com. We definitely would love to hear them, but we just want to keep everything on topic with kind of the developer section or developer features of Axosoft. All right. Great, so without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Mike Robinson, who will just kind of take over the presentation here. And if you do have any questions, I'll be there to hopefully help them out and answer them over chat. All right, here you are, Mike.
Hi, everybody. All right, well, let's get started on this webinar for the Axosoft RESTful API. Let's start with an overview. Let's give you we'll talk about what you're going to get today. First, we're going to do an overview of the API. We're going to discuss what the API does, the types of apps you can make, the ways you can connect, how to activate the API on your own time. Then we're going to explore some sample apps. We're going to go to GitHub, and we're going to look at some code that you would be using if you were writing your own client app. And then we'll open up some of the sample apps, and we'll show you and walk through one of the sample apps that we have out on GitHub that you can use as your starting app when you're learning the API. Then we're going to build a web client timer using the API. So we're going to take that one of the core apps that we have, and I've gutted it and added some additional code, and we're going to step through some of that and show you an example of taking that and using that as a framework to create your own first app that uses an Axosoft database. And then we're going to have some Q&A, and Brett is going to show a couple things off on his side, and then we'll jump right into the questions. All right, so let's start with what can the API do? Well, the API can do a variety of things. First, it can interact with items inside an Axosoft database. You can do your gets, your adds, updates, deletes. It can interact with defects, features, tasks, and incidents. We can interact with projects and releases, those hierarchies that you use to, so you can pull those hierarchies, modify the hierarchies. You can interact with the users and customers inside the database. If you want to pull a user list or pull a customer list or do something or make some adjustments, you can do that. Then there's a variety of other things you can do, like such as interacting with work log entries, the time entries. If you want to pull some time down for a certain range, you can do that. You can interact with teams, attachments, custom fields. There's a whole lot of things that the API can do for whatever your business needs when you're using Axosoft. So one quick note before we jump in here. When we talk about items inside Axosoft, there's two different ways to talk about these. You've got the traditional method on the right, which is your defects, features, incidents, and tasks, and then you have the agile, which is more and more how our customers are referring to these: the defect backlog, the help desk, custom items, or the product backlog. Just note that in this demonstration and any time that you're working with the API uses the right column when you're interacting with these methods. So if you want to pull a list of your product backlog, you're going to make a features call. If you want to interact with custom items, you're going to be pulling tasks. That's just a little housekeeping thing there that the API pulls from that column. So defects, features, tasks, and incidents. Okay. So let's talk about some of the parts of the API. First, let's discuss the difference between private and public apps. First, you have your private apps. When you write your own private client, that's typically going to be an app that you're only going to use for your account. So you've got something very custom for your business, and that app is going to be a private app. Later, you may create apps that are more general, and those would be public applications, and these can be shared with other on-time accounts, and these are typically best suited for general purpose Axosoft add-ons. So the type of app that you have is determined by the API key that you're using, and we'll talk more about this in a few minutes. So there's public and private apps. Next, let's talk about the parts of an API call. When you are creating that call, or you're looking at it in Fiddler, I just want to point out a couple things here for people who may be new to API. This is a GET call. In this case, I'm accessing my account, making a call against my Axosoft database. And the first part is you're going to need your account when you're forming this, however you're creating the call itself. You're going to need the resource that you're using. In this case, I'm hitting the projects resource. And then you're going to need your then after that, you're going to need your token. Now, the token itself, this you're going to need on every single call. You're going to need that token, except for when you log in. So let's talk about getting that token. There's first, when you get a token, there's two different ways that you can log in. Essentially, there's two different ways to authenticate. The first is easier, and that's username and password. This is the easy way to log in. The other is a redirect authorization, and the redirect allows you to, when your app will redirect the person over to Axosoft and let that person log in. So to quickly demonstrate this, so with user password authorization, you've got a client who wants to use your app. So the pieces of information that would need to be used would be username and password, and then your app would have its own client ID and client secret that the user wouldn't need. They would log in to the database. The token request would be made, and the user would be able to access and interact with the system. So that's fine as a private app for your database. That's fine, and I'll show you how to set that up. If, however, you wanted to use this kind of login, the username and password, with a third-party app, this would get rejected, because with a third-party app, we would not want, if you made an app, we would not want your app to be receiving that username and password. So in that case, if you make an app and you want it to be a third-party app, we're going to have you use redirect authorization. So in this case, you would have a general general client ID and secret that's tied to the app itself. And then when the user goes to log, and this would be a user typically outside of your organization, someone who's not even associated with you, who'd like to use your public app, when they want to log in, they would be redirected. Your app would redirect that person over to the Axosoft side. Axosoft would request the username and password. An auth code would be sent back to the third-party app. So an auth code is handed to your application, and then a token request is made back to the on-time database. And this prevents the third-party app from getting any of your data. And I'll show you some code for each of these steps in a few minutes: the authorization code handoff and the token request back. Okay, so where do we get to some of these settings? So if you go inside your database, you go to System Settings, there's an On-Time API App section. And down here you have API settings. And from here you've got System Options, API Settings. You can, on your own target app, you can have your own client ID and your client secret. And we'll be walking through this step by step in a few minutes. This ID and secret would be for your private app. If you want to do a public app, there's a separate place under Manage Account, Public API Keys, and you would request a new key. If you want to have your app be available to everyone, this is the process that you would walk through. So typically you'd start with the private side to get learning the process. Once you're ready to start a public app, you come here, you go to Public API Keys, and you say request a key. You'll be given a GUID for that key, and it'll start as a developer key. A developer key means it's still not a true third-party app. No other databases can use it but yours. And then later, you can submit that key when you're ready to be a public key. And then we'd go and we do some security checks on your app. We give you some suggestions. There's a manual process there to make sure that your app is ready for other databases to use it. And then you'll be ready to, that app will be ready for public consumption. Okay, so let's give you some resources, and we're going to walk through some examples and show you some of these things in action. So the first thing I'd like to point you over to is the API developer site. And this is at developer.axosoft.com. And from here, we can jump right in here. We're going to give you some overviews, but from here there's API docs and examples. And I'm going to pop over here and I'm going to exit this keynote for a second, and we're going to jump over here. Okay, now open my browser. And this developer site has all the information that you need to get started when you want to start interacting with the Axosoft API. From here, this gives a full description of the difference between public and private, the different kinds of authentication that I was referring to, example applications, and then down below in this bottom section, this is our full documentation. So if you're wondering, can I make a call to, I want a list of all my users, you would just click over here to users, and here are all the calls that are available for users. Here's the get users call. You just simply do a /users, and if you want a specific user, you would just do user/ID. So we have the full documentation here of all the calls that you'd like to make. Okay, so what we're going to do here is we're going to step through. First, before we jump into code and actually run some code, I'd like to show you some example functions in GitHub. So to do that, you're going to click on this link here, and again, we're at developer.axosoft.com, and you click on this example applications link on the left-hand side. And the main piece of code that we have here is this is our main sample app for the API. It is a Windows app and a web app, so you can run it in either state. And I'm going to be walking you through this. I'm going to be showing it to you, and then we're going to be going in and making some changes to it in a few minutes. But I'm going to click on Get Code here. I want to point out a couple pieces of code that you're going to need to get started. So just a couple important ones here. So these are, we're going to show you, I want to quickly show you a proxy, and I want to show you a way to deal with authentication. So the first one is the proxy. So if you go over here under the web app, I'm going to click on web app, and I'm going to go to the controllers section, and I'm going to go to this API controllers section. Now, some of you probably already know this, but some of you don't, and that has to do with proxies. If you're going to be writing a web app that's on your server, on your domain, that's going to be interacting with your Axosoft database over on the hosted servers, you're going to have client code that's needing to communicate over with another server somewhere else, and your modern browser is not going to let you do that. So you're going to need a proxy. This proxy will be sitting on your server. So your client will then, if your client needs to, let's say, get a list of users, the client will communicate via this proxy. The client will make a proxy call up to your server with a request. Communicate to Axosoft and get me a list of users. And then the server will go out, make the call, get the data, and then return it in this result variable here. So you'll need some kind of a proxy like this just to get started. So the easy way is to take the example that we have, the example project that you can download from GitHub, start with that, modify it how you need to, and all the working pieces are there like this proxy. And like the next thing I'm going to show you, which is dealing with authentication. So I'm going to back out here. The other quick thing I want to show you is under the OAuth controller. Now when we had the keynote up earlier showing the guy communicating with the server and the different methods, this is where you can control some of that. So when you have a redirect, if you're doing a third-party app, for example, and you have your users that are some user is trying to communicate to your application, and you get to they want to log in and you want to redirect them. If you scroll down here, there's a redirect section. So this is building out the redirect URI that you're going to hand them to redirect the user to the Axosoft database. And then these other methods here, obtaining the verification code and the authorization code callback, these are just the chunks of code already written for you that handle that code getting handed back and forth, so that the user can properly log in using redirect. So these kinds of things are already here written for you, and you can just flip through them and look at them on the GitHub side. Okay, well, let's jump into a piece of code. And what I'm doing, again, if I back out here, go back to where we were, I am downloading this piece of code, which is, if you can say get code, and you just download it up here. You just pull the code, download it to your machine. It's a Visual Studio application, and let's go ahead and take a look at it. So if we load that up, this is the application right here, and on the right-hand side, if I expand this a little bit, can everybody see my code okay? I want to make sure this isn't too small. Let me know if it's too small, Brett. So on the right-hand side, we have the web app and the Windows app. You essentially have three pieces of code here in this example that we're giving you. The OnTime API has a lot of the shared code, and then you've got a standalone web app and a standalone Windows app, and these are example applications that can interact directly with a database. You can download this and fill in a couple pieces of information and start working with it right away, and that's what we're going to do right now. So I'm going to jump back to my browser, and I created a app here. Let's go ahead and log in. So we're going to mimic as if you were logging into your database. I'm going to sign in. This is a completely fresh database that I made before this. Whoops. And we're going to set up an API key the way that you would on a new database. We're going to attach it to that sample piece of code, and we're going to start interacting with our database. So we're just going to do a full demonstration here. Started from scratch, did not mean to do that. While that's resetting, so we're going to create API key, and then we're going to start interacting. So, thanks, I don't know how this works. Okay. I'm actually going to load sample data. I made a misclick there a second ago. I want some data to be in this database so we can make polls, we can pull items, and we can demonstrate the API in action. So I'm going to actually generate the sample data. That was my misclick there. After this is generated, we're going to hop up, and we're going to create an API token that we can start using. So no thanks, I know how this works. And walk me through the basics, and stop. I don't need a tutorial. Okay, so now we're inside the database. We have some sample data in front of us on a brand new, this is a hosted, freshly created database. And I'm going to jump up here to Tools, and I'm going to go to System Options. And we're going to create ourselves an API key that we can use right now and start immediately communicating with this database. I'm going to go to the Axosoft API settings. I'm going to enable my API. For security purposes, we disable this by default. I'm going to enable that, and I'm going to go to Manage API Keys. And let's go ahead and add ourselves a key. Okay, I'm going to call this my test key. And now I have a client ID and a client secret. So I'm going to take these, and the first thing I'm going to do is copy these, this client ID and this client secret. Okay, now I'm going to pop back over to this piece of code. This is the code that is inside GitHub. Now, from a previous webinar, I had code in here before, but this is blanked out when you download this from GitHub. This is the only thing modified inside this piece of code, is this. So I'm going to update my API webinar. I'm going to add my client ID, and I am skipping a couple steps. What you're going to want to do is on the right-hand side, under the web app, you're going to go to this web config. The web config drives the web app, and the app config drives the Windows app. So we're going to go to the web config, and I'm going to first show you, this is a demonstration of pulling the code from GitHub, connecting it to a fresh Axosoft database, connecting them up, and running the program. This is something you can do immediately right now. So the only thing you have to change is that your Axosoft path, the client ID, and the client secret. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to paste these in. Okay, and I'm going to need the secret. I'm going to copy the secret, save that. Okay, close that, and pop back over to the Axosoft side. And in here, I'm going to paste in the secret for this new database I just created. Okay, so we have the location, we have the section needs to be Axosoft. We have the location, we have the client ID, and we have the client secret. And we modified that inside the web.config file for the web side. I'm going to set the web client to my starter project. Let's go ahead and save that, and let's give this a run. This sample app shows you the basic functionality of the API through a web client and through a Windows client. That's some kind of a one moment while I debug this. Looks like one of my, looks like I have a reference that's out of whack. Curious. One of my references seems to be, I just was running this beforehand, so I must have bumped something. Let me double check all my stuff here. Well, let me try it on the other side here. I have another app that I was testing with. Let me test this one quickly. Apologize for this, folks, having a technical snag here. This is a separate one. Let me try the same thing here. This is the secret. Let's input the client ID. So if you ever need to get back to any of your keys, you go back to Manage API Key. And I need that ID again. I have a separate instance of this application that I was testing with before, and we'll just switch over to that one. Not sure why the first one wasn't working. And then we need our database here. Okay. Make sure that the path is correct. Yep. Put the ending slash here, and we're going to run this. And I'm going to run this in the web app. Let's go ahead and run this one. Okay, this one's working. Not sure why the other one is not. Essentially, what I will do quickly here is let's go over the Windows side. This is kind of adjusting what I need to show you guys here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to cancel this for a moment. There is a web piece and there's a Windows piece. So I've inputted on this web.config, I've inputted my data. I'm going to copy these 3 lines of code, my configuration, and I'm going to jump over in the right-hand side here under the Windows app side. I'm going to go to the app config. And over here, I'm going to drop these in on the, there's two places that you'll need to input your credentials, which is what I'm doing here on the Windows side. I want to show you the Windows side first. Normally what I do is I show this application clean from GitHub. And for some reason I've got a reference there that's not working. So I'm going to come over to this one here that I've modified a little bit. But I do want to show you the Windows app. I'm going to set the Windows app to startup project. And let's go ahead and run this guy. This demonstrates using WinForms, pulling data directly through a database. So I'm going to run this first through the Windows side, slightly different order than I usually do. Okay, so first log in with your on-time credentials. So I'm just going to log in with my username and password that I have over for my on-time for my Axosoft database. We're going to go ahead and log in, and this is going to fill up the WinForm. That's fine. That's interesting. Did I not save? I'm wondering if I didn't save the, maybe that's the problem. I'm going to jump back to my database. No, I enabled it. Let me try one more thing. This is very strange. And we're going to close this, and we're going to pop over to...
Micah, well, that form, I think you just needed to actually click save. It didn't post the...
Let me go. Yeah, is that what I did?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Yep. Okay, so the data wasn't saved. So it was saved on my client, but it wasn't saved on the server. So let's push that through and try it. Thank you, Brett. Let me try that. And pop open. Let's try running the Windows app again. So hopefully that key is now saved properly. We're going to log in. Fantastic. Thank you, Brett. Okay, so this is an example of, on the Windows side, what an example of using this API and pushing it through a Windows app. This one here does basic interaction with items. So these are items inside my sample database, and I can start interacting with them. I can come through here and say, add a new defect, call it hello, create that item, and if I pop over now to my database and refresh, and let's just go to, and I'm going to do a reverse ID sort here. Let's do descending IDs. And I should probably do by items too. Let's add added a bug. So I'm going to go create a bug super tab here, do a descending ID sort so I can find that new item. There's my hello item. I created that through that app. It really is that easy just to insert your configuration and make sure you save the API key, which is the thing I forgot to do. So make sure you go through and save the API key, and you can immediately log in and start using it. Okay, so coming back here. So if let's go to the app. So this is example app. You can use it right out of the gate. You can start interacting and seeing. And if you open something like Fiddler, you could look at the calls that are being made and see the structure of the calls if you have any questions about how some of this stuff works on the inside. Okay, so let's cancel that. That's the sample Windows app. The last thing I typically do here is we go in and we modify the web app, which I couldn't, for some reason the original web app's having a hiccup. But on the web side, actually, I wonder if it was because I didn't save that. Let me try running that again here. Let me try one more time. Perhaps no, it seems to be some other hiccup. Anyway, we'll show you one more thing here, and then we'll switch it over to Brett. What I want to show you is how you can modify the GitHub code the code that we have on GitHub to modify for your own ends, and how simple that can be. So what I've done here is I've inside the web portion of the sample code that we have on GitHub, I've gone into this index.chtml and I've created a very simple timer application. So I took the code that we have that simply looks at defects, and I've modified it a little bit. I just want to show you an example of what you can quickly do. So what I've done is, if you think of what is the simplest application that you could make to interact with an on-time database besides just pulling items, I want something that's a little more interactive. So this is a timer app. So if you see the this is the code that this is the page we're going to look at in a second, only has a couple pieces of data. We've got a text field for a defect ID, we've got a start and stop button, and then we have another text area to give you feedback. So the idea here is, okay, I'm going to enter the number of a defect, like defect number 1, start the timer, some period of time goes by, then I'm going to click again, stop the timer, and I want that time duration, I want that to be sent to the server, create a time entry for that item. This is just a simple example. So here's the code I had to write to do this. So first, I have to make sure that the defect exists. I added a piece of code here that does a check, it does a quick get on this defect before we start the timer to make sure that the defect's really there. So if you enter a crazy number, it's going to immediately error out and say, sorry, the defect does not exist. So I wrote a piece of code for that. And then I wrote my create work log function. Now the work log itself, the call is going to send a chunk of JSON, and that JSON is right here. This is the template that I'm going to use for the time entry. Some of this, yeah, for instance here, we're saying make it the admin, that's the default. I'm just saying the administrator is going to be the person who did the work. I said duration of 3 minutes. This gets updated with your time. And then what the item type is a defect, what the remaining time is. But this is just the template JSON. And then we make the call. So we go through the proxy, we pull the work log, okay, we create the work log, and then, okay. Then down here, we insert some data. So I'm going to scroll down a little bit more. Here's this is where we're attaching an action to the timer button. So we're going to say when the timer is clicked, if the timer is not started, grab the current date time, and if it is already started, then go ahead and check if the defect exists, and if it does, then fire off your time entry. So this is just establishing a behavior against the button on our page. And then we display the call results in a nice fashion. And then up above here, what we do is when we make the call, we have this is the chunk of JSON that is the time entry that gets sent to the time entry call, create a time entry. And down here we modify it. So we say, okay, here's the template, but the stuff I want to modify, change the ID to the ID that the person entered, change the duration of time. We do just a subtraction for the number of minutes, insert that into the JSON, and then this JSON gets fired off against that work log entry. So all I did here was just make a couple modifications, add a couple pieces of code into the index.ch HTML of this code, and then underneath the authentication is being done for you, the proxy is being done for you. So this is, if you just want to kind of get started, you just like, well, I just want to pull some items, I just want to maybe modify some users. You do that really quickly with something like this. Okay, so let's go ahead and run this. So I'm going to set the web app as my startup project, because this is the one that I've been modifying here, and we're going to go ahead and run this. Okay, so we're going to log in. We're getting this is an example of the redirect. So now by the way, the web app redirects and the Windows does user and password authentication. So you can see both methods in action. So let's go ahead and allow this. This is on time. I'm sorry, this is Axosoft asking me if I want to log in. And now this is the very simple app that I've created with the text box, a button, and then a response form so we can get some feedback. So the first thing I need is a defect ID. Which defect ID do I want to interact with? I'm going to jump back to my database and let's pick one. So let's expand out the menu here so I can see the work logs. Let's pin this and open up work logs, and I'm going to grab one of these defects. Let's grab one that doesn't have any work logs yet. These ones all do. Here we go. Defect 37 has no work logs tied to it. So let's jump back to my code. And we have the app running, and I'm going to say 37 is the one that I want to interact with, and I'm going to start the timer. So I get my feedback, timer started. I'm going to wait a few seconds. In my code, I round up to a minute if you're less than a minute. So I'm going to go ahead and stop the timer. And now we get feedback. This is the response from the time entry being created. It says it was created, and this response gives all of the all the posts that you make will have a response giving you what changed. So here it's basically giving me the JSON representation of that time entry that was created. So if I go back and now I refresh the page on defect 37, here's my time entry that was created, and I had it round up to 1 minute. So that was by simply downloading the app, entering my configuration information from my database, and then I can now start interacting with the database. Okay. All right, pop back here. That's the end of my portion of the presentation, walking through the applications, showing you the API. Brett has a couple things to show you, and then we will pop over to some Q&A.
All right.
We make Brett the presenter here.
Great. So, well, just quickly, I wanted to get to one question that we had. It was just asking, hey, can you use Windows authentication instead of Axosoft authentication? Yes, absolutely, because really all that you would need to do is that you would just need to use the redirect authentication, because basically all that the redirect does is that it redirects you to the Axosoft web page, and then once you're logged in there, it passes your login credentials back to your application. So, regardless if you're authenticating using Windows authentication or a username and password, both of those are handled the same way by the Axosoft login page, and then we'll shoot you back over. But you would just need to use that redirect authentication. All right, good question. All right.
Hey, Brett, to hand this off to you real quick, I don't see you in the list.
Sure, so I should be able to make myself the presenter.
Okay.
All right. Is it can you guys see okay there? All right.
Yep.
Okay.
You're good.
Great. So let me just go ahead and hop over. I did have a small little presentation is here. Just a couple of slides, and really what I'm going to be talking about a little bit more is just the API wrapper that we have. Show off some of the other things with the example applications that are using the API wrapper, and then just a little bit about our partners page and program that we have in case you guys develop applications that you want to then just go and actually share with others, just on our website. So we do have a cool little NuGet package that is a .NET, here we are, it's a .NET wrapper for really all of the calls that you would be making to the Axosoft API. So you can actually just download it right into Visual Studio using your NuGet package manager. And actually, if you're looking at the code that Mike showed in the sample applications, there's a couple apps. The Win app that we have actually does use all of the API wrappers for all of its calls. So if you just go ahead and just quickly take a look at some of the applications we have here. Oh, here we are. So like the actual items control. That's the designer. There we are. Okay. Sorry, it's a little bit more difficult with a mouse pad and a small little screen. So like if you wanted just to know how to go ahead and get items, what we're actually using here is rather than just forming our own web request, just using like the straight JSON packet and then sending it, we can actually just use our API wrapper just to create the proxy for us, and then we can just go ahead and get any information that we have. So that application actually does use our C# wrapper, or if you want, there is also this console app, which is probably the best place for examples that we have just using the .NET wrapper. So for instance, if I just hop on over here, you can see there's a little section right up on top where you would be configuring the proxy and then setting up authentication. And then we can just go ahead and start adding, let me just go ahead and stop this because I was running the website. And then you can just start looking at some of the examples. So the first step, what we're going to do is just configure the proxy. So very similar to how Mike was just adding the authentication information in the web config. Right here, it's just right in the actual C# code. So you just need to have your URL and then also the client ID and secret as well. Let me just go ahead and grab those from my application. Oops, sorry. I am very click happy and not in the good way. All right, so again, let me just go ahead and copy the information here from my API key. There's my ID. And then I can also pull up my secret. Okay, and this app also then uses just username and password for authentication, just because it's a simple just console app. It's not going to pop open a window. So you could just put in your username and password. I think mine is just, it's filler, basically. All right, and now you've got everything that you need just to go ahead and connect to your app. So, if we want to go ahead and run this app, it'll pop open the console and just make a couple of API calls. So really simple things like getting projects, getting items, totaling number of items and incidents. There's a lot of really good examples. I think there's about 20 or so that you can really just expand and see, really kind of everything that you would need. A couple definite advantages to using our API wrapper over just making like the plain calls are that, it's a little bit easier just to go ahead and, really quickly write some code because, for instance, if I just want to, say get information on all my items, let me go ahead and cancel this out. If I wanted to go ahead and just get the projects, I can just say project example. Okay. Then right here, what I can do is just use my Axosoft client. And then, if you want to find projects or really any of the controllers that you would have. So really anything that you see here as a method that you can get would be options that you would have under the API for developer at axosoft.com. So really anything that you would have like for getting features or getting projects. Just put in like the name of your client, and then here if I want to return projects, you can go ahead and do that. And then if you wanted to get, create, update or delete, you can do all those. So if you want to just do like a really simple get, you can then of course either just do a get, which will get all projects, or if you want to add any parameters there just to kind of filter things down, you can do that as well. And of course, any of the parameters that you would pass would just be a dictionary with any of your parameter names. And those would also just be in line with whatever you would match up here. So if I were to do a get for projects, I can use any of my parameters there. If I wanted to do a get for features and wanted to use any parameters here just to say, what page size I wanted, if I wanted to filter by project or assign to ID, and determine which columns we would have, you would just pass those as a dictionary into the API. So it's a really just a straightforward wrapper there that kind of, makes just writing code, very simple. A couple of the cool things about this is that since it is a NuGet package, we do have different versions of our API. So like whenever we do, make updates or have anything there, we can release like a new version, which a lot of times just has small changes. You could always continue using your older version of the API, just as long as you keep reference to that version of the API. And the way you would do that if you are using the NuGet wrapper is just to not update it. However, if you did ever want to upgrade to use, I think we're in version 5 of our API, if you wanted to upgrade to use some newer calls that were in version 6, rather than having to go through and make sure that all your calls work and then update your version for all the calls that you're making through your, if you were just going straight to the endpoints, you would just update the NuGet package. We just go ahead and release that there. If you are an installed customer and you're currently a couple versions behind, say that you're still using OnTime 2013, before we changed the name to Axosoft. If you were using one of those older ones, we still do have API access, so you can go ahead and develop using that. But you would just want to make sure that you download the version of the NuGet wrapper for your specific version. So I think it was like V3. So whenever you do actually download the wrapper from NuGet, you would just want to make sure that you get the V3 version of the NuGet package. So I don't want to harp on too much there and get too much in the code, but it is really kind of straightforward. And if you want to pull any of the information or if you want to make any specific calls, you can still reference just the regular documentation for the API, because all of these parameters can still be passed in as parameters through the wrapper as well. Okay, let's go back to my little presentation. I did skip one over here. Mike did show some of the example applications. Like I said, the console app and the Win app are both using our API wrappers, and they also do use the 2 different versions of the authentication. So if you are using redirect, that web example is a great place just to go ahead and get code. We always do have some people that are asking, well, I'm not building a web application, I'm building either a mobile app or could be either like a console app or something that is like a desktop application. It's not a website, but I still want to use the redirect authentication. How do I do that? Because I need to open a web browser. And the real answer is that, yes, you do need to open up a web browser. You can just launch a little navigator window, navigate to that website, and then your redirect URL or redirect URI can really be anything at that time. Like, some people even put Google or Yahoo as their redirect URI. But since you control that window, you can just go ahead and capture that actual redirection and get the access token from there. So that is just one other question that always comes up a little bit. And then lastly, I just want to talk a little bit about our own add-ons that we do have available, and also the opportunity for you to actually have your integration or add-on added to our page. So this is a list of our publicly available either add-ons, meaning that they kind of are a standalone application, or integrations, some other applications that we actually can integrate with. Right here, you can just see a couple. These are in alphabetical order, but BugHerd, Bugsnag, GitHub, and Google Calendar are some things that we already have native integration with. So a couple things that we have here. These do need to use our public API key, so they do also need to use that redirect authentication that Mike was talking about. But this is a great way just for you to bring other users just to your application. If you build endpoints that can integrate with Axosoft, we'd love to have you here as well. And we also do have opportunities for partners where we do actually provide some discounts and support as well for our customers. If you do build a public application, we're happy to go take it and share it with you, and then we can actually hopefully enter in a partner agreement, which has a lot of other benefits that we could have, like either options if you are then bringing customers to us that would be using your integration with our application as well. We have opportunities for that, as well as giving you perhaps a discount on your actual Axosoft licenses. So it's a great way. If you build an application which is useful for a lot of our customers, we can go ahead, make it public, share it on our page, and then hopefully enter in a partner agreement for that. So if you guys are interested in our partner program, you can email us at partners@axosoft.com. Like I mentioned, it's a great way to either get either like a discount on your current Axosoft license, or we also do provide options if your integration then comes and brings us additional customers. But any other questions that you have regarding the API, just anything with the usage, or how to format the data, or how to really get at it and get it started, you could send those just to API@axosoft.com. That actually goes directly into our own version of Axosoft, and then we'll go ahead and respond to you and hopefully help you out with any questions that you guys may have. And then really any other questions that you guys have, you could always just shoot over to us at success@axosoft.com. Just anything about the application or your account, we're always happy to help out there as well. All right, so that's really like the basis of the content that we wanted to go and cover for today. I wanted to go ahead and reserve some of the end time just for questions. So if any of you guys do have questions, there should be an option just right there in the GoToWebinar sample. We've only had a few questions so far, and I've actually tried to help out those people that have raised them and asked them directly here. But if you guys have any questions, we'd love to have them right here as well. If anything does come up once you start poking around with our API and would want to have a little bit more information, probably the best place to go ahead and reach out to us is just shoot us an email at api@axosoft.com. It's right there, and it's also pasted on our developer page. Great. So, Mike, have you been able to look at some of the questions that we have? Anything that's been raised you'd want to share? Or?
No, it looks like we don't have. Can you hear me? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Looks like we don't have any other questions right now.
Mm-hmm. All right. Great. So, yeah, if you guys don't have anything further, we could just go ahead and wrap up. We definitely want to go ahead and, of course, thank everyone for coming here. It's always great just to see, other people just interested in integrating with Axosoft and just seeing how we can really get, feelers out there just to go ahead and start popping up. Ooh, we did get one question, and it was just a thanks. So, of course, thanks everyone there. Unless, since it is submitted through the questions part, I think it could be interpreted as sarcastic, but I think that's awesome. Thank you, question mark. All right, so yeah, we just definitely want to thank all of you guys here at Axosoft for coming. And it's always great just to reach out just to other developers, not only just to see how how they use us, but also how we can get further out there into the whole just to the whole ecosphere with Axosoft, and really get in there just so you can help you guys out as much as possible. All right, great. So one last thing, I didn't mention it up at the front, but we did actually record this as well as all of our other webinars, and we will be posting it on our YouTube page once we have a chance just to go ahead and format it and crunch it up. And all of you should have a link to that in your you should get like a follow-up email which will include a link to that YouTube video, just in case you did miss anything. If you had to get up and grab an email, like you can go and watch over everything and just see some of the things that Mike was showing off, just for your reference if you guys ever want. Sure. All right, thanks everyone for coming. Take care.